Hello and welcome to everyone joining us from around the globe for the third episode of our special series of webinars on COVID-19 crisis dedicated today to post-millennials education and social life. I'm Donatella Ponziani, ESA Downstream Gateway Officer, and I have the pleasure to be the moderator for this session. Following the lockdown imposed by several countries to contain the spread of COVID-19, schools and universities were compelled to switch to online teaching. Today with our guest, we are going to discuss how national education systems reacted and responded to online schooling. What are the needs that have been highlighted in terms of communication and digital tools in order to have global access for students to remote learning? We are going to discuss the importance of social component in the education path, and of course the role and importance of space in support to education system. Now, from everywhere in Europe, let's bring in our guest. We have with us Jan Werner. He's a Director General who is hosting the webinar. Jan is on his way to his office. He was in a late flight, so we will welcome him in a few minutes. We have with us Frank Santegini. He is a secondary school pupil at the West London Free School. We have Anna Uronen, a primary school teacher from the Finnish education system. And we have Vasilis Dervos, Associate Professor in Space Economics and Policy at the International Space University in Strasbourg. I welcome them all. We will start right away with the very first question to Anna. Anna, you are a primary school teacher, and you have been experiencing the last month a very special moment for your experience. Would you like to share with us the lesson learned from your experience? And I think you are on mute. We cannot hear you. Anna? Anna? Well, let's try to solve the problem, the technical problem. Anna, Vasilis, would you like to answer the question first? Vasilis has a bandwidth problem. I hope that you are able to.
Yes, Donatella, yes, I can hear you loud and clear. I hope I'm coming through. Thank you very much. Yes, these are interesting times. And it was a very challenging situation, very interesting experience, as you put it. I would like to start by making a disclaimer that the lessons learned from that are largely not very straightforward to implement, because the approach wasn't a structured one. It was an emergency situation. It wasn't. There was no plan to deal with that. So it was an ad hoc, if you want, scenario that we dealt with. And the lessons learned from this experience, I would argue, are multidimensional. We have the administrative responsiveness and the facilitation from the institutional perspective. And we also had academic, the content-oriented, if you want, performance, and the learning objective implementation. So there were two different levels, how the administration dealt with it, and how was the student, if you want, deliverable, the essence of learning materialized. overall, the impressions we had were positive, in that the student institutional relationships proved that the deliverables oriented approach gave us a lot of flexibility, gave us a lot of novelty, a lot of innovation in our dealings on a day-to-day basis. However, the caveat is that when we say that this is positive, we have to be careful, as the students in this particular scenario had developed a familiarity. We knew each other, the students knew each other, and we didn't have to go through the learning curve of enhancing socialization within the class, with the faculty, with the administration, with the personnel, etc. So this is important because we didn't start from scratch in terms of the social links and the social connections within the institution, but it caught us towards the end, if you want, of the academic year. And things could have well be different if we had to deal with this situation in the early stages of our academic cycle.
Yes, you are a student, of course, a university student. Maybe Jan, you joined us. Welcome, Jan. Hello.
Hello.
Jan, I asked question not to you, not in your habits of director general, but as a professor. Can you share the same experience of Vasilis, or your experience as a university professor was a little bit different? You can build on what Vasilis was saying.
Yes, Donatella, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk as a professor. Normally, I'm always allowed just to talk as a director general. So my course in this semester started just during the Corona crisis, and I did not have any face in front of me. I did not know the students at all because it was just a course for higher grade students. So I had no clue. But it was interesting because my experience was all the students were very well prepared to follow. What I did two things very specific. I made at the same time when I gave the lecture, and it was a lecture with a lot of formulas, I recorded it and I gave it to the students afterwards, so they could, one day later, they could really have another view, which is some danger. Then they might say, okay, why to take it online? Why not taking it later on? But what was interesting for me is that using this online technology, the students were not any longer hesitant to raise questions. So this was one observation. So students were really ready to ask much more questions than before.
Of course. And okay, and Frank, I would like really to switch. Now we had the experience, the testimony of university professor, so grown student. You are in a secondary school. What is the lesson learned you have from this very new experience?
Well, I think the main thing I learned is that school is more than just a place for learning, and is more than just tests and its lessons, but it's also an opportunity to see your friends and talk with people during the day. And I never noticed the importance of that before the remote learning started, because in the remote learning, obviously, is boiled down to just being a place for learning, and that's a very different experience from real school. And there are many things which we do in school in real life that are very difficult to replicate online. For example, speaking with the other students in the classroom is much more difficult than it is on the remote learning. But on the other hand, there are also things which are much better about the remote learning than the classroom. For example, the ability to ask the students all a question and use a meeting chat to be able to ask questions to the teacher without interrupting the lesson. So that's what I've learned from this, and yeah.
Very good, very good. I don't know if Anna solved her problem with the mic. Let's try. Otherwise, I move on. Anna, you are talking? No, we cannot hear you. So I think that we have to wait a little bit more to ask question to Anna, because we have still problem with our audio. I would like to go back to Vasilis and Jan. Your experience, you were mentioning the experience in the last in the last months. Our student and Frank was talking about one important topic. He was mentioning the importance not also to be in a group, to work in a team, to see friends at school. At university is the same. How teamwork has been affected by this new way of learning, and how did you evaluate? Because at a certain point, professor need also to evaluate students. How did you evaluate them, assess their performance in this very special moment?
Yes, yes, no, this was absolutely one of the biggest challenges that we were confronted with, because it's one thing to evaluate and it's another thing to evaluate on a fair basis and ensure that there are no, if you want, no negative impact on the student performance or on the student, if you want, relative performance to each other because of the selection of the ad hoc selection methods of evaluation. So online assessment was implemented. There were multiple levels that I experienced, both at the International Space University and the University of Strasbourg, that I had some experience with in courses. There were multiple choice format, which wasn't the initial, if you want, arrangement. Multiple choice format. There was essay examination, which wasn't very easy to manage from a distance. And the same took place with regards to the delivery of lectures and the material. For the team working specifically, as I mentioned, the group dynamics are of critical importance. And I agree with the previous speakers that this is very, very, very critical for the group's coherence and for their learning, but also for their, if you want, optimization of experience. So the advantage that we had was that students knew each other by this stage, and they were accustomed to working in groups. So that didn't present much of a challenge for them. Having said that, there are still pending examinations. So this webinar is ahead of the curve in a sense. We are still ongoing in our assessment. And I think it's going to take a while before we can see the long-term effects of this situation. The one thing we noticed, and this is my final point, is that the risks in general were perceived as higher. You can have minor miscalculations that spin out of control when you are working on a distant mode. You can have misunderstandings that may well spiral out of control rather than dampen when you have a personal interaction and social environment. So things can very easily there is a very limited tolerance for error. And I think the space sector is helping us in that respect, because this is a sector that we're accustomed to working with a low failure tolerance.
It's true. And Jan, would you like to build on what Vasilis is saying?
So in my case, also the examinations are pending. And I must say, for me as a professor, the situation is not at all satisfying, because what I need is really the reaction of the students. I have to read the faces, whether they understand what I'm saying. And I'm afraid that just the case that I give them the possibility to see the record again will not change that. So it's not that you hear something twice that you better learn it. It is better that an explanation can be given again if you see in the faces of students that they don't understand. So therefore, I'm afraid that the success is not as good as I hope to. But anyhow, it was better than nothing. But again, we will have in parallel to the lecture, there are exercises students have to do. Of course, this cannot be done now in groups as it normally done. It's a totally different setup. And we will have the examinations only at the end of June, beginning of July. And it will be interesting to see what is happening then.
And would like to build on what you are saying. I would like to ask and to listen the point of view of Franco, the point of view of a student, even if not a university student. Do you think that the e-learning affect the ability to learn? Do you feel that through remote teaching you have learned less than you were used to do in classes?
Well, I think learning is a very personal thing, and it depends from person to person. So I can only speak from my experience, but from what I've experienced online, I believe it is a solution, but I wouldn't like to do the rest of my education this way. There are some things like I said before, that online there are things that are easier and things that are harder than in real life, and I know that I've definitely found it harder to keep paying attention to the lesson when I'm at home, because in my school we have to have the camera off and the microphone off, so the teacher can't see you or hear you. And also because you're at home, it's very easy to get distracted or to start doing something else or message your friend or just leave the lesson entirely. So also the fact that at my school, sometimes the classes have been made larger for the online remote learning. And this makes it easier that you can go through the whole lesson without having to contribute to the lesson. And this adds to what I was saying before, because it makes it easier to sort of drift and coast the lesson without having to engage and contribute so much. And once again, because they can't see you, it's very difficult for them to know if you're paying attention. I can't imagine what it must be like for the teachers. They can't see the student. It must be very difficult to know how to teach the class, because I think it's very much an interaction. So honestly, I think it would be better to return to schools. Obviously, we can't right now, but when we can, it will be better to return back to online school. Return back to real school, because I feel like if we didn't otherwise, even though it's more comfortable to do online school and it's easier, I feel that my grades would suffer and my education would suffer as a result of this.
Thank you. Thank you. And you mentioned at the beginning, Frank, the importance that one of the major lessons learned is that you understand the importance also of social interaction and school. School is not just a notion. Do you think that you had, how can you suggest to balance in this exceptional situation the importance of social connection and remote learning? Is there a balance in between the two? How did you succeed in this period to maintain your social contact?
Well, I think it was very difficult in this period, because not only did we have to transfer to online school, but the life was almost completely shut down. So it's very difficult to maintain a balance, because we couldn't really have that much social interaction. But once the lockdown's finished, then the online learning will be more of a choice than a necessity, and that way I think it will be easier to maintain that balance. And also at the moment, the global situation, as I'm sure you will agree, has been very stressful and a little bit scary at times. So that's made it difficult to it's made it difficult to transfer to remote learning. And also, when we started using the remote learning software, it was very much a case of this is a temporary solution and it's not going to stay like this, which has made it more difficult to get used to it and invest fully in it, because we know that it's not going to be staying permanently. I think had my mentality been different and I thought that this was going to be the new way that things operated from now on, I think my experience would have been very different.
Okay. And what was your experience before the lockdown? Did you recur in your school to any remote learning?
Previously to the lockdown, we never used the remote learning software before. It was always real school.
Okay. And Jan, would you like to build on what is your in your opinion the good balance among the social connection? What did you experience from your student? Because you said that it was a new course, so you didn't know them, they didn't know each other, probably, I don't know. But I think that also for university students, they knowing each other, the social component is very important. What are your thoughts about that?
First of all, it was very stressful for me because of the technical situation. So that's a little bit strange. Why is the DG of ESA afraid of technical problems? The thing was, when the COVID-19 hit, really, I was not in Paris. I was in Germany, and I could not go back to Paris. And my very nice iPad is in Paris. So I had to find a solution without an iPad. I had to find a solution with a normal computer. I have a computer, a Dell, which has a touch screen, but how to use that for this very specific situation. And what I did is I turned the screen upside down, and I was writing on that screen upside down, which was a challenge for me, maybe also for the students to read it. But so this was number one. The number two was, of course, this question of having no interaction. And this is really something I need. For instance, just you write down a full page of formulas, etc., and you don't know whether the students are with you. Could they follow just by looking to the equations, etc.? Could they follow, or are they lost already? Which is very simple if you have the students in front of you. Even if you have hundreds, or the biggest lecture I ever gave was with 800 students. Even then, you can still see whether the students are with you or whether they are absent. But now with this remote learning, tele-learning, you cannot. So therefore, I strongly believe that it will not substitute the normal learning, hopefully also not the normal teaching. However, we will see also that we will have what we learn through this, that we can use it also later on as an additional instrument. And what is also clear, this is also possible to use it for remote areas. I mean, there's always this very special question also about are all the people, can they really use it, or is it another hurdle of finances? Of course, there is a hurdle of finances, but better to have something than to have nothing. So if you look to education at remote places, then it's for sure for me the best solution that we have the possibility of remote learning, but it's not substituting the let's call it the traditional way. By the way, I'm really traditional for some people. I'm of course using everything, movies, PowerPoint, and all of this, but I'm also using still traditional blackboard. Why? Because it's so huge. If you have a huge blackboard blackboard in front of you as a teacher, you can really derive formulas from the left to the right, and still without any moving back here and there, you can still point to the formula at the very beginning. So therefore, in that respect, I'm still a traditional teacher.
Thank you, Jan, for your intervention. I see that Anna is back again. I think she solved the problem with her audio. Can you confirm, Anna?
Yes, thank you, Donatella.
So we have been, I update you, we have been discussing of the experience from the point of view of a secondary class student of Frank, and the experience that both Vasilis and Jan were sharing with the university professor. And since you were not in, we didn't have the opportunity to talk about the lesson learned from a professional of primary education, because I think that for you the challenges were even higher. Can you share with us your experience as a primary school teacher? How old are your children, and how was this experience these last 2 months?
Yeah, thank you, Donatella. Well, these technical problems are nothing new for me and my children. I have faced these same things with my 25 students during our remote learning. So I'm a third grade teacher. My students are 9 to 10 years old, and it was quite impressive to see how teachers and students adapted to all of this at short notice. The transition to the remote learning happened quite quickly. And in practice, teachers had 1 day to plan and decide how to organize all the things. And in Finland, teachers made the things to work, actually. And in learning, we highlight students' participation and self-direction in their comprehensive learning. And this showed us that children are flexible and adaptable to learn to use, for example, these different kind of digital tools. And many of the students prove that they have ability to take responsible for their studies by themselves, even though they were quite young. And this also showed us how important role as an adult will have in the whole learning process as a builder of the base for the learning processes. The more the child's self-direction has developed, the more successful the child could get through in this remote learning independently. And I heard what Frank said earlier, and I think we learned that also, that schools are not only the places to learn things. For some children, school is a place where they can be safe. There's some caring adults available, and they get food. In Finland, we have free school lunch, and that was also offered during this whole remote learning period for homes. So the school has also a caring role in children's lives. It is a safe and structured environment for every child that not only enables equal chances to learn, but of course things also to create base to grow as a member of society. Finding your place equipped with the good social and emotional skills is a very important part of human life. And to get there, I think we need real interaction and communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I would like to build on some consideration that you shared with us. You said that first of all, we all know that the Finnish education system is one of the best in the world, is well known. I would like to ask a question. You said that you are also caring about the child as a person with fulfilling not only the learning needs. It comes to my mind one other question. I don't think that all children everywhere in the world, not only in developing country, but also in rich country, I don't think that access to remote learning is easy for everybody. In your experience, what do you think? Is it something that is for rich people? Did you experience in your class difficulties for some children that were not having the right access to PC, to e-learning, and what is your experience with respect to that?
Well, actually, as you said, to use digital tools in teaching or learning, of course, you need a device, and there must be suitable materials also available. In our school, teachers has also a large selection of materials, but we have an excellent situation where we have enough devices to use in learning also. We were able to offer a laptop for those students who didn't have a working device at home while the remote learning period. In our school, about every fifth device was borrowed at homes. So yes, we had this solution for that. So of course there are some differences between in cities and towns in Finland too. Some towns and cities are in unequal position in terms of resources. So we had quite nice situation in our school.
Okay. And Frank, thank you, Anna. Frank, was the same experience for you, for your schoolmates? Did you experience in your class or among your friends any difficulties of this kind?
Well, I think similar to the previous speaker, my school was very kind and lend out devices that are usually available in the school to people who didn't have access to it, I think, to provide a more equal approach to remote learning.
Thank you, Jan. So far, well, there are in ESA we have several activities on in support to education system, especially in remote areas. We have programs to ensure in Africa, for example, remote learning. Do you think is something that is going to be reinforced in the following months here, also in Europe, in our countries?
Yeah, it's right. ESA has a broad education program, which is for countries of our member states, meaning all the countries we're here in Europe. But at the same time, we have also special programs in Africa, which we call Space for Education. And there we are reaching something like 10,000 children, and have about, also we are not only teaching children, but especially also we have programs to give the information to teachers, because teach the trainer is of course an aspect which you can do with remote learning, and by that you have still the social contact between the teacher and the students, but by really educating with newer knowledge the teachers is also something which is very important, especially for remote sites like Africa or things where they do not have the access to that information as we have. So therefore, I believe that especially in that areas, it's very important and interesting, and they don't have the same ability and possibility as we heard now from Anna and Frank, that they can just take a computer home. So therefore, this is also a special issue. But over there, it's not that each and everyone has its own computer, but they are meeting in a room where there is a computer, so that they are then in a classroom, but still remote learning. So that's a mixture of what we are doing here, over here, and what is done over there. Of course, based on the different situation with the COVID crisis, which demands a lockdown, while that's not the same situation in Africa. So what we are doing as remote education, remote learning in Africa is a totally different setup. But it shows that using modern technology is really helpful. I mean, also in this period, think about, okay, you are all too young, but think about 50 years back, you cannot do that, but I can. And we would have a lockdown like that. That would mean what? The students stay at home, and that's it. Full stop, nothing. And we would have less information about all the system. Okay, TV still existed or already existed, and also radio, but that means we are in the favorite situation that the pandemic came when we had the technology to tackle it. So that's an interesting point. So we should be happy that the pandemic came now and not only some years ago. So, and this is therefore, we have now to see also for the future, what does it mean?
Thank you, Jan. Vasilis, from your experience, I'm curious to have the broad, because we had two very good example of democratic access to e-learning. You have international students, so in international space university, there are students from everywhere. What is your feeling? Is it something? Is the e-learning approach a democratized approach?
I think there is clearly an element of, if you want, exposure to non-privileged, let's say, people in general, not specifically for ISU. But I would like to take a rather interesting approach to your question, Donatella, and side with our student here and say that the students actually had a hard time. It was very challenging for them. It wasn't easy, especially because they come from an international background. They were away from their houses, they were away from their countries, they were away from their natural environment. And even though they were, dare I say, mature students in inverted commas, it was a very difficult situation where they had to deal with confinement, they had to deal with uncertainties, they had to deal with announcements in languages that they wouldn't understand, for example. So the administration had to step in and translate some of this information. It wasn't, let's say, a normal structured exercise on e-learning. And that raised the stakes in many aspects. In terms of the social interactions and the face-to-face absence in this period, I would say that it is critical and necessary for the learning experience, but it's not sufficient. I would argue that in today's world, where you have a lot of digital, let's say, environments around us, surrounding us, it is you need to have some exposure to this learning environment from a digital perspective. So I would say the social, the face-to-face interaction is again critical. It's necessary, but perhaps not sufficient. The last thing I would like to add to this is that it is very much dependent, the experience, on the academic cycle. For students who are learning basics, for example, who are not masters in the subject, if I'm teaching engineers who don't have a background, for example, in law, in political science, in economics, or in business, it's very difficult to teach basics without rapport and looking at their faces, Jan put it, and see whether they understand or not. It is not possible. You can't have a one shoe fits all tin can approach to education. There is an aura in the class. It is, I wouldn't say metaphysical, but there is a rapport. You have to look, you have to feel the sense of the class to see whether they understand what you're talking about to them. And for basics, for communicating basic concepts, this cannot happen, in my opinion, easily online. Once they have that, it's far easier, once they know each other, to move on and exploit. And actually, they might benefit from the experience, dare I say. But it very much dependent upon what is the academic cycle, what is the point in the academic cycle that this e-learning will be applied.
Do you think that, Vasilis, do you think that the challenge that you have been facing, and I share all the comments that you have made, depends in part on the level of readiness of our system, of our education system to go digital? Were university really ready to go digital, or it was just a way to face the emergency, and the fact that it comes now into our habits could better the situation in the future?
I think we were the guinea pigs. We were the guinea pigs. No, the system wasn't ready. This wasn't a structured approach to it. Like with many things in life, there is a chaos, if you want, a framework that will lead us perhaps to a better equilibrium. I think with this experience, we should be able to arrive to a better mix, to a more complementary mix between traditional systems of education and e-learning. I think at some point we will be able to draw more conclusive, if you want, analysis about what happens and what works, but the experience wasn't something that the system was prepared for, but it coped because the educational system by default is we are dealing with young people, and we learn more than the students. And we benefit more than people think because it's keeping us young. It keeps us on our toes. It keeps us, if you want, it keeps inspiring us because we're dealing with young people that are looking up to us to learn something. And in that respect, I think we will try to find the best lessons learned from this approach and move forward. But it's not the end. I don't think we are at the end of this. Let's wait and see what happens in the near future.
Thank you, Vasilis. Jan, following what Vasilis said, what can space do? What is your feeling with respect? Are you sharing the impression of Vasilis?
So thank you. Yeah, I'm sharing it, but I also would like to mention that we should see that there is a difference between a digitalization and remote learning. I mean, it's obvious that remote learning without the digital computers would not work as we did it right now. But my hope is that we come in future also with a totally different type of education, really digital learning, digital lectures, which is an addition to what we are doing normally. So space can do a lot. First of all, space, we have the instruments, we have the communication tools, we have the satellites for communication. We can do really the remote learning, really not just in one city or in one country, but we can do it on a global scale. This is already important. The other thing is, what we have developed in space technology is called concurrent design facility. This is a facility which was not developed for lockdown, which was not developed in that specific direction, but it is where the experts of different areas are sitting together, all connected with a computer and with the main system. And if they build if they want to build a satellite, each and every one, the different experts bring in their expertise. Now, if we copy that into our experience now with remote learning, then my hope is that learning in the future is not something where you open the head and put all the knowledge in and then you close the head, but where we really make learning as a process of the students to really go beyond what was done so far. That is always my personal aspiration with learning. Learning should work and should make people able to work beyond boundaries. And maybe this idea or this method of concurrent design facility, if we are now using this one and using the remote learning of the last weeks together, put that together, maybe we come up also to a new type of digital lecturing, digital learning, where it's not just a teacher-student relation, but where the students are direct active part of the learning, as in a small group, as it's sometimes done at different locations. So it might be that we can have this this exercise also in the international dimension. So having students from all over the world working together, learning together, and by that really coming to new solutions for our society at large, because we need it. And there, space can help with secured communication from one continent to the other.
Thank you, Jan. I would like to build on that with Anna, because you have a very young student. If you have to project yourself in the future, and you have to dream, what is the position of digital in your teaching?
Well, thank you, Donatella. Based on my experience, I think it is important to use diverse set of methods and tools when learning, and the digital tools and digital learning and e-learning is one part of that whole set. All the students have different kind of capacity to learn things, and as a teacher, it's important to build a suitable base to learn for everyone, and then you can use only one tool in the learning processes.
Okay,
thank you
very much. Frank, I would like to ask you, if you have to choose and to bring with you from this experience something in the future, in your future school, the one you can dream, what would you like to bring with you, and what would you like definitely to leave behind and not to have to experience again?
Well, I think that this experience with the remote learning has been very valuable and a good learning experience, because it's showed us it's proved to us that the remote learning is a very versatile and useful tool that we might be able to use in the future. And it's forced us to engage with it in a capacity that otherwise we wouldn't have done. And I think that's been very useful to find out what it will be like to do this online. However, some of the problems that came from using the remote learning, I think they stemmed mostly from the fact that, as Anna said before, the systems had to be brought in so quickly and with very little warning. And that meant that some confusion. I can only speak for my school, but in my school there was definitely some different software and different methods and rules being used in each subject, which made it quite confusing at times for the students. But as we become more accustomed to this technology in the future, I think we'll be able to take it forward and use it in the classroom once the lockdown is finished. And I think it's proved itself to be a very useful and versatile resource that we'll be able to use in the future. However, there were times where the technology complicated things slightly. So there are things that I'd like to leave behind but they're mostly just sort of logistical things that I'm sure would be sorted out if this was to be brought in permanently as a resource, not entirely to replace the school, but to add to it.
Thank you, Frank. Before going to the conclusion and leave the floor to Jan to the conclusion, I would like to give a few minutes to all the speakers to give us one or two key takeaway from this discussion about the future role of remote learning. Let me start with Vasilis.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. Just a couple of quick points. I think that this gave us a wonderful experience so far. I think we should take the positive out of this, analyze what happened without a dogmatic approach, follow an eclectic approach to what works, what doesn't. And listen, as this venue does, to a very wide, almost like a concurrent design facility approach, like Jan kindly put it. Listen to all the stakeholders to discover novel approaches, because especially the students are very, very pragmatic. And they have a lot of information and a lot of novelty that will inspire the future learning methods. I think we should take some time to reflect on the experience, but I'm not sure that this is perhaps the best time. I'm not sure this is all over, so we have to be prepared for September.
Thank you, Vasilis. Thank you for your intervention. Anna, two takeaway?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to say what will the exact role will be in the future. First of all, it's kind of a relief to know now we can use that remote learning. On my point of view, it could be used somehow part of the contact learning in a comprehensive way that Jan told earlier. But I think no matter what the pros and cons are in the remote learning, it needs to be planned properly and to be used longer. Then it's possible to evaluate its effects more and closely. At this point, it's hard to say what are the real learning outcomes for the students during these weeks. Teaching is also learning by doing, as we all know. And now we have a small sample of all of this, which certainly taught us a lot. We might face this in the future, probably in a few months, but in teaching and in general, I feel like we are now more prepared to be prepared in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. And Frank?
Well, as I said, I think interaction, I've found the loss of it to be very important and very, very significant during this. And also, I think, although there are problems with it, I think that remote learning has shown promise, and I think we'll be able to use it in the future. And the technology and the internet have helped us all around the world in countless different ways. And they've proved themselves to be a great way to learn. And schools and all educational institutions are places built specifically for the purpose of learning. So why should we deny them the greatest resource that we've created? And for that reason, I think that we should be looking to use technology much more widely in schools in the future.
Thank you very much, Frank. And now I leave the floor to Jan for the final conclusion about this discussion.
Thank you very much, Donatella, and thank you very much also for Vasilis, Frank, and Anna. So it was an interesting discussion for me. It was giving me also some new ideas of what we have to consider, which sometimes sounds so trivial to have a computer available. I learned now that this is not at all trivial, especially not for students and pupils. But of course, it's also not trivial if we look to remote areas in the world. So therefore, what for me is one very important thing we have to consider before we starting to look to the opportunities and all of this of remote teaching and learning is we have to fulfill the preconditions. And I believe that the society can fulfill the preconditions. We heard that from the schools, but I think also in general terms. So the availability of technical equipment is very important, and it's different whether we are looking for technical equipment for individuals or whether we are looking for technical equipment for a bigger group. So, but this is something we have to see. Also, the precondition for me for the future is that we should not forget about the social interaction. Many people are talking right now in the corona crisis about social distancing. And I'm always saying this is something I don't want to use this word, and I never use it. I say it's physical distancing. We should not talk about social distancing. We should be socially together. Even so, we have to be, from a physical point of view, we have to need some distance. So then, if we have these preconditions fulfilled, we can talk about the opportunities. And this is, as we learned, as we also heard here, to learn in very difficult situations, whether it's at a school or whether it's at a university, or also if we are looking to very different people learning. So it might be, in this case, we discussed mainly about students and pupils. But as I said, also, we should also think about the continuing education for teachers, because if you are elsewhere in the world and the technology and the things are developing, then there should be also a learning of the teacher. So maybe it's also a good instrument to have some learning possibilities for teacher and for professionals. I mean, also technology is changing, so therefore. So and we, as we learned, the opportunity is also to go to more democratization. I know this is a difficult word because everybody would say democratization means you really go to everyone, and we know that there are some hurdles concerning the technologies, the availability of technical equipment. But it is, if you look on a global scale, then by remote learning we can really make also countries and people fit who do not have normally access to the same education. And it's also an opportunity to learn in international interaction. So that means that we can have mixed classes, not only during a visit of some students here or there, but we can have it as a permanent and for each and everyone available possibility. So therefore, for me, we are now looking forward, and we might change the word of education and the word of learning to something which is, we need a new word for that, because it should be a new paradigm of learning or education, which is really, and Anna mentioned that already, which is an active individual or joint process. And this process is good for the society because our whole society, globally speaking, needs, of course, something to go into the future. So we need new ideas. We need also motivation for people, and motivation for people is based on curiosity, but motivation is also based on access to information. And therefore, I believe that by doing the right thing in this new type of learning, new type of education, however you call it, I'm looking for a new word, we could also do something for the society at large. And if we together, and space is one tool, just one tool for that, if we can really do something for that, then we are really coming back to, Donatella, the name of this webinar, as you called it, Post-Millennials Education and Social Life. So we are then coming back to this situation that we are not saying here's education and there's social life, but that we can really put it together for the sake of, now a big word, humankind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jan. I would like to thank all the participants for the valuable input and for the discussion that we have held together. And we are, for those, I would like to make an announcement for those who are following us. We are going to meet again next week on the 9th of June for the next webinar. The next webinar topic is working remotely, working efficiently. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.